the Together initiative. The Together for Peace initiative is a joint intersectoral project of UNESCO Bangkok to engage education stakeholders in building positive peace in the regions. And this specific webinar will focus on living well with super diversity and on sharing good practices of education on cultural diversity, intercultural dialogue, and media and information literacy. The outcomes of the webinar will feed into the regional dialogue that our office will host by the end of this month. So before starting the sessions, I would like to recall a few technical information about it. So the webinar is recorded. The participants' microphone and video have been disabled, but you can post anytime your questions into the Q&A box, and we will encourage speakers and expert panelists to reply. And for those of you who haven't seen the previous slideshow, we would like to encourage you to stay a few more minutes at the end of this session to discover our online exhibition on women in history that we launched yesterday for International Women's Day. So without further delay, I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Shigeru Aoyagi, Director of UNESCO Bangkok Asia Pacific Regional Bureau for Education, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Ako. Distinguished Secretary Generals and high officials of UNESCO national commissions, embassies, development partners, educational institutions, and colleagues from our partner agencies. Good morning and good afternoon from Bangkok. It is my great pleasure to say a few words at the opening of this third session of UNESCO's Together for Peace webinar series, Living Well with Super Diversity. First, I'd like to express my sincere thanks on behalf of UNESCO to all the speakers and panelists for joining us today to share your views and insightful experiences on developing positive peace in the region in a context of super diversity. As you are fully aware, the Together for Peace initiative was launched to bring together member states and civil society in Asia and the Pacific to work towards positive and sustainable peace with support from UNESCO Japan Founding Trust. Without peace, there cannot be sustainable development. Without development, there cannot be lasting peace. Putting this initiative into action, UNESCO has organized a series of thematic webinars ahead of regional dialogue later this month on 30 and 31st March, where we will discuss T4P programs and partnership building more in detail. In the previous webinars, we hosted discussions on transformative pedagogies and building ethical and sustainable relations between humanity and nature, which are both foundations of positive peace. Today, we will focus on creating conditions for intercultural dialogue, cultural diversity, and media and information literacy. Living well with super diversity is essential to attain the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 4 on quality education, SDG 11 on sustainable cities and communities, and 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. There are also key pillars of UNESCO's mandate to build the defenses of peace in the minds of people through education, the sciences, culture, and communication. Dear participants, our region, the Asia and the Pacific, is home to more than 4 billion people. Many of our bonds and rivalries are related to ethnicity, religion, and language, and rooted in history. Understanding our own past and that of our neighbors, appreciating shared values and differences, as well as communicating better, will enable us to celebrate our common humanity in the interconnected future. The digital age has rapidly expanded people's access to information and transnational communities. However, in recent years, we have witnessed the spread of disinformation, misinformation, and hate speech, inciting misunderstandings, confusion, discrimination, and even violence. The vulnerable are often the most affected, especially now amid the COVID-19 pandemic. In our waiting room at the beginning of this seminar, I hope you enjoyed the video on UNESCO's Memory of the World Women in History exhibition. The exhibition has gathered documentary heritage collections on gender equality and women's empowerment from countries around the world. And the key message is that even with diverse cultures, traditions, and values, there are always common concepts and goals to be appreciated and upheld, such as gender equality, as we celebrated yesterday, International Women's Day. This reminds us of the urgency in improving institutional and educational policies and practices to promote positive peace. We must stand together for the irreplaceable value of culture and heritage for embracing diversity and universal values. Meanwhile, enhancing citizens' media literacy and digital skills, discernment regarding information, and intercultural communication should be reinforced in curricula and practices at all education levels. In our region, this vision may face more challenges and lead to bigger responsibilities, considering the diverse political mechanisms, cultural norms, media landscapes, and educational systems. At the same time, this diversity is a strength if we choose to make it so. This is why we are gathered here today to share experiences and good practices from different countries and stakeholders on respect for cultural diversity and media and information literacy as the path forward to living well together. The outcome of today's discussion will contribute to the regional dialogue on the role of education in building a peaceful and sustainable future in the Asian Pacific, to which you are all kindly invited. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, the Ministry of Education of Thailand, Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, and many other partners will join hands to organize the regional dialogue. At this webinar, we are reminded again of the importance of building and restoring the bonds that connect us, to protect and enable the most vulnerable during times of crisis, and to strengthen our peaceful and sustainable societies. With these brief remarks, I wish you all productive and fruitful discussions. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much, Shigeru-san, for your opening remarks. And now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Javad Motagi, the Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Shigeru, colleagues and friends. I'm honored by this opportunity to share some thoughts regarding such you have my video, I guess. Okay. I'm honored by this opportunity to share some thoughts regarding such a vital global issue as peace building. We live in a fragile and uncertain world. Hundreds of millions of people are on the move, escaping conflicts and poverty in search of safe and better life. The current COVID-19 pandemic has seriously worsened the situation and aggravated existing tensions. Peace is something that cannot be achieved by any individual, organization, or government. It requires the joint efforts of everyone, of the world society in every single country in the world. It is a slow and difficult process of changing the way people approach the world, change of mindset and behavior. In order to survive, humanity needs to build a new type of ethical and resilient society based on respect for the others and care for nature. The current COVID-19 pandemic is not the first, and unfortunately, it will probably not be the last one in the history. Same with mass migration and many other problems that humanity is facing with. What is new in our societies is that individuals are more interconnected than ever before. And that is due to rapid development on information technologies. In a way, now we are all neighbors on this planet, and we have to learn to live as good neighbors. Everyone knows that you cannot be safe and secure if the neighbor's house is on fire. In the same way, you cannot be safe and secure if the neighbors have no job, cannot pay his or her bill, cannot send the kids to school and give them good education, or if neighbor is excluded from social life for whatever reason, race, religion, gender, age, or other. In a global village we live in, it is more and more likely that your neighbor will speak a different language, will look different, will worship in a different way, or will eat different food. Some experts call this phenomenon super diversity. We can also call it the facts of life. The essential point here is that all these differences do not equal enemy. It is common practice in difficult times to search for scapegoat, and usually the finger points at someone who is different in some way. This approach does not help anyone. It only leads to more misunderstanding, distrust, disinformation, discrimination, exclusion, and eventually violence. In order to replace all these negative notions with positive ones, such as tolerance, understanding, harmony, and progress, we have to start from somewhere. And there is no better starting point than education. Only through education we can address the unjust social, economic, political, and cultural factors which prevents us from building a more just, more equal, and as a result, more peaceful society. Media has an important role in education, which is one of the main functions together with information and entertainment. In a super diverse environment, there is also super diversity in social media and digital platforms. All these multiple instruments for fast dissemination of information sadly do not automatically contribute for better understanding and peace. Very often they spread misinformation, use hate speech, instigate discrimination and violence. It is our obligation to prevent and mitigate such tendencies. We, the people working in media, have the responsibility to encourage our readers and audiences to live well in diversity. This can be done through programs that promote dialogue, reconciliation, and sustainable development. It is necessary to show the minority groups in favorable light and to focus not on differences, but on our common human worries and hopes. Only in that way we can change the mindset of wide audiences and particularly contribute to building bridges between communities. The crossing of ethic, religion, and cultural barriers should come naturally to well-educated and properly trained journalists, reporters, producers, and other media people. What is expected of them is to show positive examples of friendly, neighborly relations, empathy, and mutual help in difficult times, or, in other words, positive peace on local and international level. The key for the media to succeed is to keep distance from the logic of power and approach with a power of logic. We media professionals should be in favor of building bridges instead of walls. Despite all uncertainties, we still have hope in media to change the scenario by addressing the roots that divide us into us and them. Media can strengthen dialogue within and among nations to make the other a part of us. Participating in dialogue is the same as playing together and not playing against each other. Any individual school of thought or civilization that takes part in dialogue will be a winner. I highly appreciate and fully support Mr. Shigoro and his UNESCO initiative and in focusing on education and creating and strengthening meaningful dialogue. These initiatives will go a long way in establishing peace and tolerance in an extremely complex world that we live in today. All of us should strive towards a society in which no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Javad, for your support, for the support of ABU, and for your very powerful messages and recalling the responsibility of the media to promote peace and reconciliation and mitigate hate speech, violence, and discrimination in the content. Before moving to the next session, I would like to propose a photo session with all the speakers and the panelists on board. Could you all turn on your cameras? And what about Shigeru? Yeah. Okay.
We will take 2 times.
Can I include myself?
Yes, what about Shigeru?
2 times. 1, 2.
1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Okay. And one more.
One more photo? We can use only one camera. Okay, we should have seat next to.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So now we are moving to the next sessions, which is a keynote speech from Rora Yerekesheva. So Rora is, she's a professor at the Faculty of Oriental Studies at Al-Farabi Kazakh National University, and she's also a senior research fellow at the UNESCO Center for the Rapprochement of Cultures. And her area of research include identity, cross-cultural religious encounters, and social cohesion. She is the author of several publications, including the latest one on the canvas of cultures. And she participated in several international research projects supported by UNESCO Almaty office. So I welcome Rora Yerekesheva. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear organizers. Let me, if I may use my presentation, let me start with sharing screen, which I would like to share with you. Do you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So thank you very much, dear friends, and very good morning to everyone. And it's my pleasure to see all of you today. And of course, thank you very much for organizers to doing this incredible job for organizing the third in a row meetings, and hopefully to have at the end of the month, this month, another one. Also, happy Women's Day to everyone. And as the spring increasingly unfolds its beauty with every passing day and minutes, let us all hope for the better in this post-COVID world. So it is my privilege today to give a keynote address in the Together for Peace initiative organized by UNESCO Asia and Pacific Regional Bureau for Education in partnership with the governments of Japan and Thailand, the aims of which is focus on the importance of education to cultural diversity and media literacy, information literacy. So in addressing this initiative's key question, let me start first with the concept of peace. Then I will briefly, then I proceed further towards education and peace, and finally to briefly discuss some practices related to cultural diversity and media literacy. So first, what about the concept of peace? And throughout several decades, there were discussions on what are peace and peace-related activities, such as you can see here, peace construction, peacekeeping, peace maintenance, building, mediation, reconciliation, culture of prevention, and culture of peace. But does peace necessarily relate to the absence of war only, and consequently with some measures to achieve and maintain peace, or could imply some other dimensions? According to the UNESCO publications on Long Walk of Peace, published in 2018, which you see before you today, I am just using the quotation from that book, which says that today peace is not only about war and large-scale violence, but also about social justice or poverty alleviation, women's empowerment, and harnessing the potential of young people and children's welfare. So it also brings to the fore environmental, health and cultural concerns, including heritage, music, theater, and sports. So it means that our understanding of peace could be described as the evolution from the previously used concept as the absence of war towards the new ones. So today peace is understood in a much broader way or dimensions, and is linked, of course, to development. Today, peace is not today peace, every dimension of people's and communities lives, their relations among each other and with the nature is about peace and peace building. And the increased pace of globalization, as we used to say, digital revolution, forces us to look at this concept from the more holistic perspective, whereas the COVID pandemic extremely zooms and enlarges the existing challenges. So therefore, conceptually, new dimensions of peace come to the fore, such as peace dividend, when it comes to understanding the shift from so-called demographic dividend towards peace dividend, or positive peace as it was elaborated by in the conceptual note submitted by the organizers, which I carefully read, and they also have been highlighted several significant issues within the same domain, like the concept of positive peace, which I mentioned, the human flourishing, or the 5 dimensions of peace. So equally same way, we can also make a notion of the shift from a widely spread human capital towards human flourishing. So, or we can also make a gross development happiness as a shift from GDP to GDH as a practice, particularly on the governmental level in Bhutan. So what does all this tell us about us? Of course, it tells us about the rapidly transforming realities that we have. It tells us about the need to change ourselves, and this need should take place on a different place, on embracive place, institutional, relational, or cognitive. And within this cognitive factor, our mindset is, of course, is a very important and crucial one. So it takes us to the question how to deal with, how to make peace with, and how to live peacefully with the other. The issue of the other comes and pops up all the time when it comes to the global village issue. So here we come to the second part of my presentation, where I'd like to speak about the education and peace. Because if we accept that today is the times of highways and highways of knowledge and the crossroads of cultures, where mobility and dialogue are the ways of life, and the education becomes the vehicles and tools that helps to know and contribute to living peacefully with this other. So it means as a vehicle, education could take us from one point to another. As a tool, it provides the vistas of huge opportunities and possibilities to open the whole gamut of life, to get to know other cultures, to get to know new cultures, and to understand the extreme diversity we all live in. So today we heard from Dr. Javad Motagi. He was talking about the super diversity. Perhaps maybe we also could use the term hyperdiversity, which perhaps takes us further on the plane of cross-cultural encounters and interactions. In this way, let me also remind you that the famous Jacques Delors report, which had been published in 1996, focused on the four basic pillars on the role of education it has in the modern life. And in anticipation of the modern today's lifelong learning paradigm, he was mentioning in his team the four these pillars, like learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. So equally the same way, when I was preparing my own report on youth of Central Asia challenges for peace building, I used the same paradigm, but a little bit in the another form, and highlighting the three of points, like learning to know, learning to live, and learning to live together. Where in this third pillar, highlighted the need to support public participation based on educational programs and practices, creating culture of dialogue, awareness, and understanding the other of myself. Here, let me come to the final part of my presentation, where I would like to speak a little bit about the good practices, how these practices could be elaborated on many different planes. And if we speak about education, I decided to categorize these types of education, so to give a better glimpse towards how each person could be doing this work irrespectively of the particular focus, which target groups he's working or she's working with, within which fields, like a professional teaching or for educational or outreach, public community outreach activities. So in a public, in a primary education level, I highlighted some cases which either I initiated or has been participated in. In this public primary education level, I would like to mention the textbook which we developed throughout and started developing in 2018. The book, which is about Central Asia at the crossroads of cultures, which is for school children of Kazakhstan, which would like to promote also further within Central Asia, and which speaks about intercultural dialogue, tolerance, and equity, and how to do this in a comprehensive ways. It combines basic understanding of what culture or cultural diversity is, what are UNESCO activities in the field, including its key declarations or such huge activities as educating on the rapprochement of cultures, or what is UNESCO World Cultural and Natural Heritage List, and so on. It also gives introduction towards the history of dialogue through the glimpses on the history of the traditions of culture, Central Asia, on the Great Silk and other routes, on ancient and modern religions and interfaith dialogue. If we go further to the higher education level, I would mention from my personal experience the designing of so many of courses, particular for your attention, I am presenting the one which is called East and West in World History for MA students. And here also I used to promote the idea of UNESCO and its activity for the practical training of the students to support the themes of identity, dialogue, and cross-cultural communication. On the capacity building and skills development levels, there could be mentioned another forms that could be implemented. Particularly in our region, in Kazakhstan, we organized the research capacity building training seminar on preventing violent extremism, PV for researchers, which was organized together with UNESCO Cluster Office. And that training was aimed at strengthening the capacity of the local researchers and civil societies, organizations, representatives to conduct theoretically informed, empirically grounded, and policy-relevant research and analysis on the phenomenon of violent extremism V and its prevention, or PVE. And of course, on the conference level or so-called public outreach community level, many of us will do this on a permanent basis, like different seminars, webinars, or hybrid online, offline, which particularly here I mentioned the one which we made together within the UNESCO Unity Network for Interreligious Dialogue and Intercultural Understanding, UNESCO Associated Schools in Almaty. Or we could also use these festivals of cultures or exhibitions that also could be a huge asset towards building and towards education, this capacity of the people, irrespectively of their age, whether they're children or researchers or don't relate to any fields of or just passers-by, how to say. So this cultural festival, the Art of Living, the Way of Living, which we organized in celebration of 115th Jubilee of Mahatma Gandhi, also was a manifestation of how we could use the different formats like traditional cultures preservation, traditional music, or master classes made by famous masters in the field. Of course, when it comes to the another individual level or personal outreach, each of us could participate, be engaged in different types of public guest lectures, blogs, vlogs, whatever, both on personal or collective levels through YouTube, thematic platforms, or social networks, and particularly the ones which celebrated the diversity. From my perspective, since I was interested in the symbolic representation of cross-cultural dialogue as had been manifested in the art of Central Asia, I started doing these lectures, which I also incorporate into my classes in the university and also display on the public platforms. And finally, if summing up, I will just say that if we take education on various levels and in various formats and see it as a powerful tool to address the themes of super or hyper diversity, then we could speak about the importance of education and its links with the digital modalities, which we're yet to embrace more comprehensively. And of course, we could speak that this could bring very positive changes to make the cross-cultural encounters very peaceful and natural and organic way of living. So with this, I would like to thank you for attending, for your attention, and again to thank the organizers for providing this opportunity to speak about this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Raura, for kicking the discussions, for introducing us to the concept, but also to the practical way of delivering intercultural education to tolerance. We have one question from the audiences to you. So if I may raise, in this time of pandemic, do you still hold the Festival of Cultures in social media platform?
No, not now. Perhaps I didn't mention that it took place in 2018, before the pandemics. But why not to take this online and to make these new formats available to everyone? So to expand the possibilities and to expand our audience where we all could participate. So perhaps we could think about how to organize this in future. But as of now, we're not doing any of these types of festivals of culture. But we recently held online presentation of book presentation, which basically based on the following up of this conference proceedings, which Festival of Culture, which embraced international conference, artifacts exhibition, and photo exhibition. And as for photo and artifacts exhibition, we can do this, particularly in the University Al-Farabi, which we took and we made a short video. So and we could distribute and put on this on platforms as well. So but as of now, a little bit some adjustment to new realities needs to take place. However, the idea basically is that irrespective of the situation, this could be done also on the online platforms.
Okay, thank you. So now we move to the panel discussions on the good practices of education for intercultural dialogue and media and information literacy. And I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Sue Weiss, who is the regional advisor for social and human sciences.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many of you here. I'd like to just say a couple of words to introduce this session. We're going to take you very much around the world with this session. We have speakers coming from all parts of the world in all time zones, and they'll be focusing on different types of activities that are essentially about building tolerance. And Dr. Laura has kindly introduced the topic of peace and how peace is more than the absence of war. But essentially now, how do we get there? What are those kind of practices and modalities that we can do? And we're bringing to you a selection of ideas from the different parts of the world, particularly focusing on using cultural heritage education, promoting media literacy, and all of these things aimed at developing tolerance and learning to live together, as put in the Delors report, and that was great to remind everybody of that. So our first speaker is Professor Kiechi Oyasu from the Asia Pacific Cultural Center for UNESCO, based in Japan. Professor Oyasu has previously been a professor at the Center for Global Partnerships of Education at Okayama University, and he also worked for UNESCO for a number of years. So he's going to be talking a little bit about some experiences he has with all of those jobs, and particularly on good practices for integrating the concepts of cultural diversity and media literacy in Japan and Asia Pacific. So over to you, Professor Oyasu.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint slide. So I hope you can see and hear my voice.
Yes.
Okay. Let me start with the title of the presentation is Information and Communication Literacy for All Stakeholders, based on the case studies on community development collectively. In my view, this peace or understanding the diversity, live with the diversity in the community, that is the basis for the peace building. So my discussion point today is when we talk about literacy, we usually think about 3 R's and the functional literacy, and the theme of this webinar, information, media, literacy, etc. And this kind of education and learning take place through formal and non-formal, informal space and means. And basically teachers teach and experts provide expertise. But under this information revolution and globalization context, this kind of role is being changed. And so my question today, main question today is how about our literacy, the literacy of teachers, experts, bureaucrats, and so on. So that is my question. So I will discuss this issue today in the context of collaboration, particularly multi-stakeholder collaboration context. When we talk about peace building and SDGs, such a complex issue, we focus on the multi-stakeholder collaboration that is very useful approaches. But how can we work together? That is the question. And one example is collective impact. There are several criteria such as setting common agenda, shared measurement, and reinforcing activities and communication and set up the backbone support. And in view of this background and idea of a collaboration, we have collected 7 case studies from 4 countries, as you can see. But we found that the context is so diverse. So it's difficult to develop one-size-fits-all type of model. So we look at the process, how collaboration takes place effectively. So when we talk about the collaboration, some of you have seen this kind of ladders, the left side. This is a participation, is a continuous process, and then collaboration and ownership. But the question is, can we climb up this kind of ladders? And the right-hand side, working with different stakeholders is good. But can we maximize our potentials? Because we have a potential productivity, but there is some gap between the potential productivity and actual productivity. I put just 2 things. One is a motivation factor that when we work together, like brainstorming, that, well, somebody will do it. Sometimes we have this kind of feeling. And coordination factor is if we have some different opinions and if we have some conflict, this working productivity is getting less. So how can we work in collaboration in a better way? From the case studies, what we found 2 things. One is we need to balance the power. Maybe not, we cannot establish an equal power relationship, but we should balance. And then to make a balance, we need to have a good learning, not only the community people, but experts and power holders. So let me give some examples. One is, this one is from the Philippines for the community-based disaster risk reduction for inclusive approaches, particularly the people with disabilities. So this is a donor government, NGO community initiatives and with trust. And people with disabilities are not just a recipient, but they are also the active members. And so this means that these people should play the good functions in the collaboration. The capacity building is needed not only for the community people or people with disabilities, but people, those who have powers and also the providers, they should also understand. So they need to have a good capacity building. Next case is from India. This is about the biodiversity conservation under the Maharashtra Gene Bank project. So this community initiatives and the government, universities, NGOs work together. Experts provide technical assistance to develop the data bank and also baseline data and so on. At the same time, local NGOs and communities share their wisdom and the way they work through the community bottom-up process and share their experience through exhibitions. So this process is also learning opportunity for the experts from outside. And my last case is from Japan. the context of Japan is an aging society, as some of the countries also experiencing. And we have a good coordination mechanisms of education and health and welfare. This is a case from Matsumoto City, central of Japan. And learning center, we call it Kominkan. Kominkan staff does not just sit in the center, but they go out and visit the community and have a meeting and dialogues with the community so that they can learn about the realities, not from the documents or information notes and so on. And university students also, we have this kind of different culture between the senior citizens and the young people. So if they work together and to try to find a community treasure, they understand better and communicate better and learn each other. So I just put it in a diagram that we should look at the context. Both the community people and the external people understand what is the context of the situation. And then when we have a management cycle process, I think this is somehow common to many activities and projects, that we should keep the power balance so that we can learn mutually easily. But at the same time, we learn so that we can keep the power balance as much as possible equally. And we also need to have a good linkages, particularly like a national level or global level, SDGs and other policy and goals, so that this initiative can be linked with the overall picture of the government and the community. So my last slide is, my point is that all stakeholders, not only teachers teach and experts provide expertise, but also we also learn from the community. Particularly understanding the context, and this is a kind of information literacy and also mutual learning through the continuous dialogues and collaboration. This kind of collaboration and communication competencies type of things. We may use some language, but it may mean differently in some context. And teachers tend to teach answers, but I think we should encourage the more peer learning and also self-directed learning and so on. The last point is that it's not always easy to sustain and also expand the small initiatives. We may have to have another kind of language or dialogue skills to talk to the policymakers, how to show the evidence and so on. So this kind of literacy skills and competencies will be required. So that's all from my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Oyasu. And we will be having a Q&A at the end of this panel. So anybody who has any questions for any of the presenters, please do put them into the Q&A function on Zoom, which you can open through the options at the bottom of your screen. From Japan, we're going to move to New Zealand. And in New Zealand, we have Dr. Gul Inaj. Gul is an expert on global cultural heritage education for conflict resolution. She is a lecturer at the Nanjing Technical University in Singapore and the founding co-director of the Centre for Asia-Pacific Refugee Studies, which is at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. She's going to be, we've asked her to talk today a little bit about her experience with using cultural heritage to help in conflict resolution, and in particular any good practices for cultural heritage education that can highlight those kind of experiences in peace building. So over to you, Gul.
Greetings. Actually, I'm addressing you from Singapore, and I'm delighted to be part of this important gathering, and thank you very much for the invitation. I currently hold a joint appointment. I'm a lecturer at School of Art, Design and Media at Nanyang Technological University, And I'm also the founding co-director of Center for Asia Pacific Refugee Studies at University of Auckland. During the allocated 8 minutes, I will talk briefly about my experience with intercultural dialogue, and also I will introduce you the current projects we're doing under Center. My background and my engagement with intercultural dialogue for peace actually goes back to 2 decades. In 2002, when I started living in the divided island of Cyprus, and at that time I was the chair of history department, and it was on the eve of Annan Plan, and they were writing new history textbooks. It's more about, you know, the future. And I was the first Turkish scholar, I'm originally from Turkey, to teach both sides of the island, how I get engaged intercultural education. Then I moved to Singapore. I lived in Singapore since 2011. And when I came here, I got interested to continue this dialogue, but more about giving emphasis on faith. So I got trained by Singapore government as the interfaith facilitator. And I started offering courses on religious art and culture at School of Art, Design and Media. At the same time, in 2012, I founded an initiative called Opening Universities for Refugees, working closely with the displaced communities in the region, in Malaysia, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and then this program now runs under the new center as a program. I find cultural heritage education, especially the global heritage education, extremely important, not only for conflict resolution, but as well as to avoid future conflicts. And I see global cultural heritage education as an important complementary to history education in our national, curriculum. And it's even getting more important now that because of the pandemic, the fabric of our society is becoming more homogeneous compared to a year before. So in a way, as humanity, we're taking kind of a quantum step back rather than forward, going back to the 19th century nation state dynamics currently. So the global cultural education will play an important role if we can manage to put this in our national curriculums. A little bit about heritage education and my engagement and how I'm to UNESCO. I was privileged to work with UNESCO Bangkok team in 2005 to 2015 to 2017, they all got confused with their Shared Histories project. I wrote for this teacher handbook, Cultural Heritage Education chapter, and also Contemporary Art for Southeast Asia. And it was a very interesting experience for me to, as an audience, to have teachers, because I don't have the background of, the pedagogy. So I work closely with colleagues in Singapore from NIE, National Institute of Education. So, and I continue working in Cyprus, although I was in Singapore, with cultural heritage education. We created educational materials for the schools in Famagusta for the Christian heritage in the old city. So if you're interested, please do contact me afterwards. I'm very happy to share the details of that project. Then, as I said, I started working through an initiative. I founded Opening Universities for Refugees in the region, and I figured out that how cultural heritage education plays, cultural heritage in general plays an important role for the displaced communities, and especially youth. As you know, attacks on cultural heritage and diversity feature of some of the ongoing conflicts, especially in West Asia and Sub-Saharan African region, and destruction and damage to tangible heritage is there. And intangible heritage, as I said, plays an enormous role in identity formation, part of belonging, dealing with emotional trauma of the displaced communities. Because majority of the displaced communities in our region are being considered as illegal, although we can't, identify a person illegal, actions illegal, but not person, yet still we use that term. And they're invisible in a society. So the tangible heritage is important, as I said, for the identity formation. So I would like to share with two specific projects that we worked on. One is a course we created called SARTE, closely working with UNHCR in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. It is connecting and equipping refugees to tertiary education. It's a short module for 3 weeks where we offer certain courses, soft skills for the selected students. So far, 95 students got the certificate, and we connected these students to certain universities in KL who accept displaced communities and members of displaced communities. There, I offered the first course called Culture and Identity, and introduced students of how important the one's heritage is and what is tangible, intangible heritage. For my experience, especially the communities coming from, as I said, West Asia, for the first time, for example, seeing a, let's say, Hindu temple, and it's so different for them to understand. So through this type of education, we give them first to understand for example, the philosophy behind this imagery, and respect the host communities, the culture, and at the same time to acknowledge and be proud of the heritage they have. And we call it a heritage on the move, because they also know that this heritage is subject to change. For example, I know lots of Afghan refugees living in Indonesia for the last 10 years. For example, cooking of rice has changed. When they moved to New Zealand, they added the Indonesian way of cooking to their heritage of rice cooking as well. So this is one part. The other one is we also work closely with the teachers of the refugee-run learning centers, because they are self-appointed teachers at the age of 15, 16. During the lack of formal education, communities educate themselves, and so that through instead of teaching history, through cultural heritage education, how to respect the host communities, how to learn the cultures of the countries that they're going to resettle in the future, and also appreciate their own heritage by recording, by talking, and keeping it alive. Currently, we're working on a project called, again, inspired from the work I did with UNESCO in 2015. This time, instead of shared histories in Southeast Asia, this project is Shared Futures, which is an interactive digital book in Asia Pacific, future-ready students. We get inspired also from Global Compact for Refugees, whole society approach. So this digital book will be for everyone, not only for refugee students, but at the same time for, as I said, will be introduced hopefully in the national curriculum as a kind of an alternative teaching material. It will be all digital. And we're going to have 2 chapters. One is climate change and related to forced displacement. The other is cultural heritage and, again, the forced displacement in Asia Pacific. We will be working closely with the current displaced communities in the region to share their experiences. I think I'll stop here. I think my time is finished. So thank you again for the opportunity, and please do get in touch with me if you're interested with these projects, and I'm very happy to share more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gul. Really great to know that there's work being done, particularly on integrating refugees and into this kind of education and a focus on vulnerable groups. I'm pretty sure I got the next location right. We're moving now to Canada, and it's quite late there, so I'm sure you'll all join me in thanking our next speaker for staying up late. This is Miss Bushra Ebadi. Bushra is a youth ambassador for UNESCO's, well, UNESCO is part of this. It's a partnership, the Global Alliance for Partnerships on Media and Information Literacy. She's also the co-founder of the Health and Information Literacy Access Alliance. And she has several other roles, but it's great that we can have a young speaker and showing the power that youth can also bring to this discussion on super diversity. So over to you, Bushra.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for having me join you. And it's now midnight, so we just wrapped up International Women's Day in Canada. Just to position myself, I'm a first-generation Afghan Canadian. So I was born in Canada 2 years after my parents arrived as refugees. And so that's a little bit about the context in which I'm speaking. And I like to position myself just so that there's some context into what I'm saying. And so I'm going to share my slides as well. Hopefully everybody can see them. I'm going to be speaking about what media information literacy, and specifically looking at the narratives that we develop and who's part of those narratives and who's developing those narratives in the context of both culture and literacy. So I'll be speaking about culture and MIL for peace and the different approaches that we can take in order to advance peace in meaningful ways, and then just some key tips that people can incorporate into their work and practices as well. So just setting the stage, about 20 years ago to this month, in March of 2001, the Bamyan Buddhas were destroyed in Afghanistan. And this became something that was in headlines around the world. And for me, it was particularly important because of my identity and my cultural background. Seeing the destruction of something that's part of my ancestry and history, and not really getting a chance to see it physically, but also seeing the connection between culture and narratives and media and the impact it has on peace between different communities. And so I started to look more deeply into the role of culture in fostering peace amongst diverse communities, whether they're from diverse backgrounds in terms of their ethnicity, their religion, even their gender identities, et cetera. So for me, this was a really important moment in my life, and really seeing something that was occurring, outside of the Canadian context, but something that was deeply impacting me, but also seeing how the narratives were being portrayed, and that it was very disconnected from the people who were being impacted as well. Much of the narratives were focusing, for example, on treaty rights and the destruction of, physical entity, but not necessarily looking at how deeply connected that was to the peoples of that region, so the Bamyan region, and then also to the Afghan diaspora around the world. And I think this also connects with how, as we've heard our previous speakers also discuss this, with displaced persons, the disconnect that they experience with their cultures, and then seeing that connection with the way that media represents those experiences of displacement, those experiences of exclusion, those experiences of oppression, for example. And so I asked myself the question, who is telling the story? And oftentimes when you look at mainstream media, the people who are most marginalized in communities, who are excluded from both digital and physical spaces, do not necessarily see themselves represented. But it's actually in that space of media that a lot of transformational change can happen. And so in asking that question, who is telling the story, we have to unpack the reality that in the spaces of media, often women have been excluded. Black, Indigenous, women of diverse ancestries have been excluded. Persons who are sexually and gender diverse have been excluded. There's a plethora of groups that don't necessarily see themselves as part of the mainstream. And then on the other hand, we've seen this evolution of people participating in digital spaces where the barriers to participate have maybe decreased for some populations. But in that space, in that digital space that's highly unregulated, we also see it being a space for violence, for example. And so I think about these issues under the umbrella of this idea of the violence of invisibility. And what does that mean to me in particular? Well, when we exclude certain populations from the discussions in different spaces, whether again, that's a physical space, whether that's in mainstream media or mass media, in television, in movies, in different cultural spaces, or it's in a digital space, we're also enacting a form of violence on those communities. And so when does insecurity start? When does a conflict start? When does war start? I don't believe it starts necessarily with the shooting of a gun, for example. I think it starts much earlier than that. And so this is a really critical time that we need to be paying attention, is what are the narratives that are being shared about different members of a community, and how is that creating disconnect between people, fostering animosity, fostering distrust. And on the other hand, looking at how media and narratives and culture can play a role in actually fostering that connection, fostering that greater empathy, and bringing people together to understand their shared histories, to understand their experiences of coexistence in peaceful ways, and how there is this possibility of co-creating and collaborating to develop a future that is truly and deeply just, and rooted in the principles of peace, and not just about tolerance, and thinking that we can, accept each other on the surface level. And as long as I don't have to interact with you in more meaningful ways, and see you in my daily life or hear from you, that is an acceptable form of coexistence. And so pushing that beyond those types of ways of thinking, I think, is really critical. And so for me, I think what's really important is the way that we approach peace, and how we should be taking a global, intersectional, and intergenerational approach. So when I talk about a global approach to peace through media and information literacy, I don't mean global in just in the sense of geography. Global also means looking at things across disciplines, across sectors, across different identities. And this connects then to intersectionality, which is a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a African-American activist and legal scholar. And this idea of intersectionality recognizes that many of us hold multiple identities, and the way that those identities impact our experiences, and the ways that we maybe are experiencing oppression or violence in particular, can be compounded based on the multitude of identities that you hold. So for example, as a first generation Afghan Canadian Muslim woman, my experiences may be very different from a person who may also identify as a female, but come from a different ethnic background, for example. And then the intergenerational piece, I think we've also discussed during this session as being really critical. And how is knowledge transmitted between different generations? In the digital space, there's also the potential of exclusion, where people who are elders may not have access to that space. And so knowledge is not necessarily transmitted in the way that it may have been in certain cultures and traditions. And that can impact the experiences of peace and connection within these communities. And so there's a few tips that I would give in order to make real impactful change in this space. The first is to decolonize knowledge in space itself. So asking ourselves who's represented and how do we understand literacy itself? And so the definition that we often share of literacy is the ability to read and to write. And I think that we really need to reshape the way that we conceive of these or conceptualize of this notion of literacy to be more inclusive of traditional and indigenous knowledges and practices that also transmit knowledge through oral traditions, which is a key part of actually media and literacy storytelling. And the other part is supporting agency. So making sure that we're not perpetuating problematic power dynamics by pushing these narratives of empowerment where we talk about a certain group that has power empowering another group, but rather seeing people as having agency inherently, but that there are systems in place that prevent people from exercising that agency. And finally, centering justice, peace, and equity, and anti-racism in all of the work that we're doing. And so that means fostering meaningful relationships that are rooted in that empathy and justice, tackling disinformation and misinformation, and again, asking who is visible in the spaces that we're able to actually see these narratives being perpetuated. Who are the journalists, and how are we protecting those journalists? Over the course of the last several weeks, we've seen impunity in the killing of female journalists in Afghanistan, for example. This is not a one-off occurrence. This is happening to female journalists around the world. And so protecting these individuals who are providing us with critical information that is really important to our existence, because literacy and the right to access information are deeply rooted and connected with our right to exist. And so I think that's really important. And so as a founder or co-founder of the HEAL Alliance, what me and my partner were doing was making sure that credible information on COVID-19 was accessible to people in different languages and formats around the world, and mobilizing communities to be able to do that, but then also tackling the increase and rise in racism against Asian populations, for example, and other marginalized communities. And I think the lessons learned from that are how powerful community can be and collective action is, that we all have a role to play in making change in this space and building peace together. So with that, I'm going to thank you. I'm not sure if I've gone over my time, but I suspect I have. But I wanted to thank everybody for listening to me speak and being able to share this space with you all.
Thank you so much, Bushra. Very, very interesting. Particularly, it's interesting. You're echoing one of the comments from the first speaker. Literacy, when we're talking about building peace, is quite a different concept. It's not the traditional literacy concept, and that's actually a good point to reinforce. So now we're going to move to Paris. So from late at night to very early in the morning. And so a very big thank you to our colleague in Paris, Dr. Mehrdad Shabahan, who's got up very early to be here with us today. Mehrdad is the coordinator for the Silk Roads platform or program at UNESCO. And again, much in line with the talk about knowledge transmission, the Silk Roads has been a conduit for knowledge moving across and between the Middle East and Asia for, I guess, thousands of years. And so Mehrdad today is going to tell us a little bit about the Silk Roads program and how it fosters peace and cultural diversity. Over to you, Mehrdad.
Hello, dear friends. Hello, my colleagues, especially Sue. I'm very happy to be with you this morning from Paris. I know that I have almost 10 minutes for presenting you this, let's say, long-lasting UNESCO's program on the Silk Road. Allow me to share my screen with you. First of all, if I open it, just a moment, I'm looking to share with you my PowerPoint. I'm sorry. I have to confess that I couldn't find it yet. Do you see my screen right now? I'm not sure.
No certificates.
Do you have my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Actually, allow me to start with a very brief presentation about the objectives of the Silk Road program. As you may see, this program, aligned with the objectives of the SDGs, especially SDG 16, advocates for the intercultural dialogue, mutual understanding, research, respect, as well as social inclusion and cohesion in view of reinforcing sustainable peace and development. This is the, let's say, big umbrella of our activities. So this program especially aims to encourage, based on the, let's say, historic background, which is consisted on the encounters and interactions along the Silk Road. The program aims to reinforce the exchange and influence and cooperation between different countries and communities. Also, the program provides a different perspective on development of the social transformation and modern plural societies due to cultural interactions and movement of people, which has greatly influenced our contemporary globalized world in many ways. And then since 1988, this program has sought to capture better understanding of the rich history and shared legacy that has flourished along the Silk Roads, and collect better knowledge of the ways in which people and their cultures mutually influence each other. And finally, this program aims and seeks to reinforce intercultural dialogue, mutual understanding, and social cohesion and inclusion in plural modern societies. These are, let's say, our major objectives in within the Silk Road program of UNESCO. This map, I don't know, do you see this map that I'm right now presenting on my screen? If you see the map, this is the historic scope of the Silk Roads, what we consider as the historic Silk Roads, the overland roads, and also the maritime roads between Asia and Europe, by passing through Indian subcontinent, Arabian Peninsula, North Africa, Russian steppes, Central Asia, and so on and on. So what we try to do through this Silk Road program is to underline and to raise awareness about the cultural exchanges and cooperations that happen between these borders. The phase 1 of the Silk Road program was launched in 1988, almost 33 years ago, and it aimed to highlight the cultural interaction between the people of Eurasia. Within the first phase of the program, 5 major expeditions were undertaken. The first one was in China in 1990. The second one, the biggest one, let's say, was between Italy and Japan between October 1990 and 1991. The third one was in Central Asia in 1991 again. And then the fourth one was in Mongolia in 1992. And for the last one in 1995 was in Nepal. This first phase of the program also resulted in the organization of hundreds of conferences, seminars, exhibitions, and performances and other cultural events in both local and international level. And also, this program resulted in the production of thousands of the research papers, photos, films, and etc. on the shared heritage and plural identities of the people living along the historic Silk Roads. Let me show you some photos of this first phase of the program. As you may see here, these are the first consultative meetings of the program in 1989 in China, and then some photos of the expeditions in Central Asia, or this is the maritime, let's say, road expedition, some places in Indian Ocean. And this photo, as you may see here, is the welcoming ceremony of the expedition in Phuket in Thailand in 1991. Then the second phase of the program was launched later in 2013. Within this second phase, let's say the objectives of the program were somehow revised. The first objective was to, let's say, raise awareness about this shared heritage and plural identity of the Silk Road in the increasing globalized world. And then within the second phase, the program is currently implemented through 3 major initiatives. First is youth empowering, then building partnership and networking, and finally developing, mobilizing, and disseminating knowledge. Within the youth empowering, we have 2 major activities. First is Youth Eyes on the Silk Road Photo Contest, and then Silk Road Youth Research Grant. With regard to the photo contest, so far we have organized 2 editions. This photo contest, which is an annual, let's say, event, offers an opportunity for young people from all around the world to capture their understanding of the shared heritage and plural identities of the Silk Road through the lens of their cameras. The participants of this photo contest are generally between 14 and 25 years old. And in 2018, for the first edition, the contest received 6,600 photos submitted from 100 countries around the world. And then the second edition was in 2019 and received 3,500 photos. Because this second edition was, the subject was somehow narrowed down on 3 major subjects, as you see here: gastronomy and food production, music and dance, as well as traditional sports and game. And then we could organize the traveling exhibition of the best photos submitted to these photo contest editions since 3 years ago. And for information, we are going to launch the 3rd edition of this photo contest within coming weeks by the end of this month, this March. So it would be great if you can raise awareness about this photo contest in your respective networks and encourage the young people between 14 and 25 years old to attend and to participate in this photo contest. The second youth activity or initiative that we are right now organizing within the Silk Road program is the Silk Road Youth Research Grant. Again, we would be grateful if you can raise awareness about this grant. This grant aims to empower young scholars to identify and promote the shared heritage and plural identities along the Silk Road. And this grant provides the, let's say, study grants for the young scholars under 35 years old, and in line with the Management of Social Transformation Program of UNESCO. The grantee, those who will be, accorded this grant, will be later invited to the most schools that UNESCO organize in different countries. So right now, the call for submissions of this grant is open. I will show you later the website that candidates can submit their submissions. And again, we would be grateful if you can raise awareness about this grant project and encourage the young scholars to submit for this grant. The call for submissions of the first edition of this grant is open up to 18 April, next 18 April. We have still 1 month for submissions. The second, let's say, major initiative that we are right now undertaking within the Silk Road program is the networking. And in this respect, the program has launched in 2015 a network of the focal points, which aims to reinforce the full participation of the UNESCO member states in achievement of this program objectives. And this network aims also to facilitate the exchange and the synergy between the member states and also the local communities within the different member states to work together for achieving the objectives of this program. So far, we have 23 member states that have designated their national focal points to participate in this networks activities and also to follow up the activities of the Silk Road program in their respective countries. This is the photo of our first meeting that was organized in China in 2015 in Xi'an. The third, let's say, major initiative of that we are right now undertaking within the Silk Road program, as I told you, is developing and disseminating knowledge about the Silk Road's heritage and plural identities. In this respect, we have so far developed online platform, which is the Silk Road online platform. And also we are right now developing an interactive atlas and a thematic collection of cultural interactions along the Silk Road. With regard to the platform, as I will show you later, it's a website that compile and disseminate on weekly basis knowledge on the shared heritage and plural identities along the Silk Road in English, Chinese, Arabic, and Russian, and also promote different initiatives on the Silk Road. This is the link or the address of this platform that you may see later, unesco.org/Silk Road. With regard to our Atlas and thematic collection project, this project aims also to identify and promote concrete fields and elements that have facilitated and been generated from the cultural interactions and exchanges along the Silk Road. In another word, if I want to explain more concretely what we want to do through this program is that after almost 3 decades of advocating for the importance of the Silk Roads as roads of dialogue, exchange, and everything, everybody knows that these roads are important. But through this activity of Atlas collection, now we want to show, especially for general public and youth, what has been achieved, what has been resulted concretely from these exchanges, how the people, I mean, modern societies or modern people are sharing this heritage in their day-to-day life. This is the main objective of this Atlas and thematic collection. This project also, as I mentioned, target expert communities and general public, especially youth, and tries also to retrace the historical and geographical imprints of these exchanges along the Silk Road. This project also illustrates the various pathways and networks developed to facilitate the circulation of ideas, belief, knowledge, crafts, goods, and instruments along these roads. And finally, in total, we will have 18 thematic volumes or themes that will retrace these exchanges. If I want to show you then the themes, you may see here, they are architecture, traditional sports and games, agricultural and botany, astronomy, navigation, calendar making and astronomy, food production and gastronomy, textile and clothing, medicine and pharmacology, paper making and printing, ceramics, porcelain, pottery, tile and glasses, coinage and metals, language and literature, religion and spirituality, musical instrument and themes, traditional paintings, calligraphy and manuscripts, carpet making and decorative arts, artistic performances, and finally philosophy. Within these 18 themes, we are trying to first identify and showcase the major fields of exchanges and their results. So far, this program, I mean, this project has launched and developed the content on food production and gastronomy, music and musical instruments, traditional sports and games, textile and clothing and accessories, and finally, religion and spiritualities. We are also planning to launch, hopefully within coming months, the themes and the content of the themes of arts and artistic performances, miniature and traditional paintings, carpet making, calligraphy, and architecture. So this is a very, let's say, brief presentation of the Silk Road program. Allow me before ending to show you very briefly also our website. I don't know if you see now my screen that I'm trying to show you the website of the Silk Road program or the Silk Road online platform, which also tries to present on weekly basis the elements of the Silk Road's heritage. I would invite you to visit this website later and to see different activities that we are right now organizing. Also, we have provided direct links here for submission of the grant. As I mentioned, if you know a young scholar that they wish to submit for this youth research grant for supporting their research on the Silk Road, they are most welcome. And also you will find the link toward the photo contest. So here is my presentation. I stop here, but I remain at your disposal if you have any further question regarding this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Medad. I didn't myself realise that it was a 30-year-old program and that you were packing that in, but the idea of an expedition sounds quite interesting to us. So our final panellist for this session is Professor Munzifa Babajanova, who's coming to us from Tajikistan. Professor Munzifa is at the Russian Tajik University, Faculty of History and International Relations, and the Director of the UN Resource Information Centre. She is going to be talking to us about her experiences of using education for intercultural dialogue. So over to you, Professor Munzifa.
Thank you so much for giving me floor. And okay. diagnosis of the discussion, good practices of education for intercultural dialogue, media and information literacy. Dear colleagues, first let me express my gratitude to you for the invitation to participate in this event. Let me start with a brief introduction to our UNESCO Chair, Intercultural Dialogue in the Modern World. The UNESCO Chair, Intercultural Dialogue in the Modern World, was created in the Russian Tajik Slavonic University, and the agreement on the establishment of the chair was signed in 2004 between the rector of university and the director general of UNESCO. The official opening of the UNESCO chair took place in November 2004 with the participation of the regional director of the UNESCO cluster office in Almaty. Education, science, and culture became the basis of the department activities. The main goal of our chair is the organization of research work in the field of the problem intercultural dialogue in the modern world. Development of a modern concept of teaching disciplines in the culture cycle. The work of the chair is aimed at introducing the theoretical provisions of research work into the practice of teaching and educational activities of students. That is, at improving the educational process in the professional training of student youth. The context of aggravated migration process from the Central Asia region, especially for the citizens of sovereign Tajikistan, the problem of intercultural exchange became urgent, both of the level of interaction of national cultures and at the level of educational process. The possibility of introduction to the achievements of the cultural heritage of all mankind, as well as building bridges, mutual understanding between different representatives of the region and the expansion of their cultural and moral horizons. Ms. Krista Picard, Director of the Almaty UNESCO Cluster Office, Mr. Pedro Manuel Gonzalez, UNESCO Headquarter, Dr. Laura Elkesheva and Ms. Arina Miasoet also took part actively in the work of this event. As you know, the UNESCO Universal Declaration of Cultural Diversity emphasizes that it is culture that should be considered as the totality of the distinctive features inherent in a society or social group, spiritual and material, intercultural and emotional. And that in addition to art and literature encompasses a way of life. It's mean the ability to live together, value systems and value. For this purpose, it should be noticed that the main role in achieving the goals lies through education. Education, it's main instrument, mechanism where we can use it and teach our student, our new generation about how we live together. FTSU today is the only educational center for training of professional culturologists. Carrying out culturological training of professional culturologists in line with the UNESCO project Intercultural Dialogue in the Modern World. The chair is developing a concept for teaching disciplines in the cultural cycle, which takes into account that modern world culture, and particularly the culture of modern Tajikistan, develops through the interaction of various local and functional cultures. In this result, a network of communication appears that supports a huge variety of not only styles and types of mentality and or behavior. but also value orientation and national ethnic identity. This communication can proceed through mutual clarification of relations through feud and conflicts, but at the same time through mutual adoption and understanding of the originality of neighbors or cohabitants on a single territory. In the practice of the UNESCO chair, the preparation and conduct, it's one of the example, conduct by students of the Day of the Mother Language, which with the participation of the representatives of national communities living in Tajikistan. The concept being developed is based on the themes of dialogue, mutual understanding, intercultural exchange, which is becoming one of the leading in the modern world. The most important source of the formation of the problem of intercultural communication for us are cultural anthropology, comparative cultural studies, and the whole complex of disciplines of cultural and psychological, pedagogical cycles used in the educational process. In 2006, at the headquarters of UNESCO, an official document was signed on the creation of the network of UNESCO chairs on inter-religions and the intercultural dialogue, Unity in UNESCO, of which our chair also became a member. But maybe it will be discussed, but I don't know why our UNESCO chair was removed from this network now. The university teaches in academic discipline intercultural dialogue in the modern world. Also, this issue used in other disciplines and courses. The chair has published a teaching and I would like to show you. This is Kaleidoscope of Culture, published in 2007. And the Kaleidoscope of Cultures tutorial has been on the UNESCO website for several months and has been recommended to UNESCO member states as a teaching material. The program of the academic discipline, intercultural dialogue in the modern world, in the specialty cultural studies. But also Department of International Relations, journalists, linguists, etc. Intercultural dialogue in the modern world. It's also big textbook for a student. We published in 2015. When we open our UN RIC, United Nations Resource Information Center in Tajikistan. It's center third in 6 countries, one Moscow, second Almaty, and the third in Tajikistan. We're also using this center for teach and organizing several events with students and with our guests, especially and the main role is how we're living together and together for peace, which we today discuss about this. Member of the UNESCO chair and the students participate in the work of international, regional, Republican conferences, seminars, roundtables, meetings, and other events. In practical classes, lectures also on the disciplines culturology, culture and religion, humanism and of Eastern cultures, Renaissance, East-West, and other students prepare students prepare a presentation on the cultures of the peoples of the world through the cognition of the cultures, everyday life, traditions, rituals, costumes, dishes, etc. of other peoples. We reveal and explain how different peoples can and should live together. amicably, respecting each other. Cultural diversity through education, and it is necessary to start teaching, explaining this from childhood. The knowledge gained experience in the childhood allows adolescents through education is a pledge to live in harmony and together for people with different cultures. Now we have prepared a textbook based on the previously I show you published textbooks in the modern world, intercultural dialogue in the modern world. This textbook has been supplemented with new material, revised, and is in the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Tajikistan for assigning the stamp of the ministry. Why did we decide to combine, supplement the material and publish the textbook? First, because there are practically no previously published textbooks, even in the RTSU library. And it is, sorry. And second, on the recommendation of the Minister of Education and Science of Tajikistan. Migration is a complex social, economic, and political phenomenon, and I not tell you too deeply, but just remind that we support UNESCO Cluster Office. We organizing school, the most school youth return migration in Tajikistan problems and the science-based solution was held at Dushanbe in our UNRIC Center in March 2019, 20 and 29 March. Colleagues and speakers above talk about COVID-19, so I will not talk about it for a long time, but just a few words about COVID. We all faced this disaster which brought not only great human losses, but also raised many questions for us that had no answer. Sorry, without dwelling and all the problems, I would like to know how our students should themselves in this difficult situation. At first, we're planning to organize groups from among our students, volunteers. However, the situation with the pandemic developed in such a way that there were many questions, but there were no answers. Despite this, the students decided to provide assistance to doctors in need of treatment. They delivered food and medicines, organized shifts, etc. We continue to work with students in the direction of living together with diversity, but in complements with sanitary standards. I think this is evidence that together we can teach children and youth from different cultures to live together in peace and harmony to build a peaceful and sustainable future in the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Munzifa. And that, I guess, completes our little tour around the world. We were a little bit over time, so we're just going to take one question. It's a very good question, and I know that Bushra, you have answered it in the type, but the other participants can't see it, so I'm just going to ask you the question again. Sorry, it's moved. In an effort to promote peace globally, what is your opinion in coming up with subjects or a syllabus that is internationally accepted to be incorporated in schools around the world, and some of the challenges in doing this?
I think it's my opinion that we all not only participate in this meeting. I think we can first invite and work with the ISP schools And yes, and UNESCO chairs in other, not just only inter-religious and intercultural dialogue. And pandemic learn us use it, this webinar and Zoom, etc. But our meetings, I mean, when we can touch all of us and may ask some words and exchange experience, it's more better. But it's very good that we use now this. Previously, speakers tell a very interesting example and suggestion. I think we must be think how we will together, because our region is very big, but how we will can work together in this way, in this sphere. And I think we can very joint very actively work, especially with our cluster office, with our regional office, and etc. And headquarter too.
Bushra, if you would like to add to that.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I echo many of the things that were just shared, but also wanted to say that I think it's really important for us in that curriculum development to recognize the structural and systemic issues that are serving as barriers for peace and sustainable development. And so as like an international global curriculum, that can be definitely present, but then we also have to localize that curriculum because it's not a one-size-fits-all model. And in that development of the curriculum, also think about it in a more like collaborative, co-creative process. So making sure that communities aren't just seen as beneficiaries that we're developing these curriculums for, but how are their identities, their experiences being reflected in the curriculum, and how are they also part of the groups that are implementing it. And part of that, I think, is also involving young people in the process, because often young people are excluded from developing educational curriculum and being really like fundamental key partners in that process. And it doesn't serve anybody well if certain segments of society are excluded in the process.
Thank you so much. And apologies about the other questions, but I do encourage the panelists to also look in the Q&A feature and perhaps respond by typing to those questions. We're going to hand over now to Professor Sajida Haider-Vandal in Pakistan. She is the Vice Chancellor of the Institute for Art and Culture, and she's going to give us a quick summary and overview and some thoughts on this session. Over to you, Professor Sajida.
Thank you, Sue. It's been an intense session, I think, and it's full of knowledge and exchange and sharing. I'd just like to briefly first mention the 5 or 6 points that were raised by the keynote speaker, Dr. Laura, because I think they set, they're important to be reminded of those. She kind of like spoke about the concept of what is meant by this whole idea of promoting peace. And then she goes on to talk about peace, education and peace. Then she mentioned some of the good practices, the community level interventions that are important in terms of reaching out and creating a dialogue with people. She mentions the festivals of cultures, and then also the personal outreach level, that how everybody can play a role, particularly using the information media that is now available to us. Basically, I think the point that was made and that was carried forward very articulately by many of the panelists was that education at various levels and in various formats is a powerful tool. And we've seen some very good examples of that. And it kind of she also gave us some practical ways how to use that. But then the panelists, as they come, one by one, and they start talking, you have this powerful kind of a narrative that is shared with us. We have Professor Kiechi Oyasu, who's the Director of Education at the ACCU. His title was Information and Communication Literacy for All Stakeholders, and then case studies on collective learning. What is real, he addresses the issue with first raising this question, okay, what is literacy and literacy skills, competencies? Do we need, what do we need for a multi-stakeholder collaboration? That is basically the key question he raises. And especially in the light of the complexities of the SDGs. So that is kind of something that he wants to focus on. And then the second question he says, okay, what is the ways that we can work together? In his presentation, there was much that I missed because, you know, I couldn't see it very well, but he shows challenges in collaboration and how we can maximize our potentials. When talking of Philippines, India, and I think Japan, he mentions this, that in the Philippines, the disaster risk management kind of a arena, he is talking more of the capacity building that was necessary for that intervention. In India, it was the information, education, and communication, and primarily focusing on you know, people working together to get the data, you know, to put together a data which could be shared. Then in Japan, I think it was a very interesting kind of a you know, intervention that he spoke about, and that is the intergenerational learning under an aging society. And community, and he spoke about the community learning centers which are established. I think this is a feature which was also picked up by some of the other you know, speakers, the panelists, because one of the key issues I think through this that we are feeling is that the intergenerational learning is also an important component of it. And it's not just the classroom teacher that will give us the kind of a paradigm shift that we're looking for in this new kind of a way that peace can be achieved through education. And he spoke about also Professor Kiechi. He also spoke about the last slides that he showed us were all the stakeholders could kind of, I think we could learn from that, because he said the first important point was this, that understanding the context was important, which obviously points towards this, that you cannot have one solution fits all, but you know, each specific context is important in itself. Then the idea of mutual learning, that you learn from each other. It is also learning from communities, from teachers, from various kind of places, and also a process of continuous learning. So you cannot sit there and be complacent that you know it all. And then linking the initiatives with the policies that have been kind of worked out. Maybe these are policies he spoke of, which could be at the international level, like through UNESCO or something, but also perhaps at the local and the national levels. The second speaker we had after Professor Kiechi was Dr. Bull. Now, she spoke about her experience in intercultural dialogue, which she had you know, been working with since 2002. And she interestingly speaks about how, as a traditional history teacher developing the courses for history, she felt that you know, the cultural heritage education complements the history education. And I think this is something that anybody who is in this field of education, higher education, would realize, that this is a fundamental realization which is perhaps very, you know, across many institutions, that, you know, history in the traditional way that it was taught left a lot of, I suppose it created a lot of misunderstandings, as she says, but when you look at it from the cultural heritage, education, and you link up the two, it becomes more meaningful and relevant. And I think it is a powerful tool, again, to to draw in the youth, because the youth can play, as she says, a very important role, particularly in the intangible cultural heritage, which plays a vital role. The youth can get engaged with that. And that again becomes like a way of the intergenerational transfer of knowledge. And she also speaks about this. She said this, that referencing her own work, with refugees. She also points out that the tangible heritage is important for building identities. And obviously in the way that she has presented her case, it is clear that she's talking both of the intangible cultural heritage and the tangible, which help to build the identities and help also for communities to come together. In her work with the refugees, I think one of the points that she has also raised is this, that giving the example of an Afghan refugee in New York, she gives a very simple example, but I think you can look at it in its many kind of dimensions. She's talking about the palau, the rice that they make in a particular way. But, coming to New Zealand, there were influences and from there, the local way of cooking rice, which came into the Afghan style. So that is the intercultural, dialogues which have taken place through centuries, which you again see very well illustrated by Dr. Kul. And then also what her point that she was making was this, that, when you are a refugee in another country, although your own culture is important, but you cannot remain within that. And the host community's culture becomes equally important, and there will be some kind of an interaction which will bring in more kind of richness to the whole kind of cultures of the world. Then she has also mentioned the shared histories, which she's currently working on. And she thinks that this can be a useful, case for, for presenting it to international audiences, because it will have, a contribution from various people and various countries. And the focus of that work is on climate change and cultural heritage and displaced communities and other critical issues which are relevant to us today. Then we move on to interesting kind of a follow-on with Ms. Bushra Abadi, who's an Afghan refugee living in Canada. So you see a perspective of somebody who is affected by the whole kind of displacements and war and all the tragedies of our world, which I think which we're focusing on and looking at a new world. And, she is in Canada now, and her presentation was a narrative, within brackets, in peace. And the presentation, which I think was very powerful, starts with one of the most tragic events which have happened in our world recently, although 2001, and it almost looks like yesterday. And that was the Bamiyan Buddha's destruction at the hands of obviously people who were Afghans themselves, but had little understanding of the history of and the importance of cultural kind of, of the culture of the nation. And she sets this, she says that this set her up to fostering an understanding of world peace because of the way that perhaps, there was a misunderstanding that since this had happened in Afghanistan, perhaps all Afghans were kind of like responsible for this kind of an action. Because we all do know that there has been a stereotyping which took place in those terrible events and times. And then this group that she's formed, which is again a group of young people, which is always very encouraging. Her presentation I saw was from a social innovator, which is something very interesting, that the way she looks at herself. And then she says, okay, the story, what is the story here and who is telling the story? Can the transformational change can happen through media? That is her point, that there is a great role that the media can play, either negatively or positively. And she brings to light, the issue at hand that we're all focusing on, education and media, and their role towards the role that they can play towards peace. She talks about the exclusion of women and others, and the viewpoint of many, many marginalized people, which I think we are conscious of, but she's brought it into the forefront that is something that needs to be also kept in mind, that the idea of violence of invisibility, the insecurities, the insecurity that kind of generates for people who are out there and whose voice does not matter or is not accounted for. And then she talks about when does war start? I thought that was a very good statement, because we all traditionally imagine that the war has started, when the first bullet is fired. But as we've been reminded by many of our panelists, the war starts in the mind much before it starts with a gun. And that is also something that Bushra talks about. And that can be a very, very slow process. And perhaps the dismantling of it will require the kind of focus that our panelists have brought to the table this morning. And talking of then approaching peace, Bushra talks about the global peace, which should be which should be intersectional, which means that we should look at the multiple identities that people carry within themselves and be respectful of that, and also know how to sort of engage with that. And then again, the intergenerational route is again mentioned by her as an important way of making sure that we are able to transfer our knowledge from one generation to the other. Then I think we have okay. Then we have Mehrdad.
Sajida.
Sorry.
Sajida,
Yes.
we are we are over time, so
Okay.
could you
Okay, I just briefly say that Mehrdad, I think we will just say two things about his presentation. It is a long-standing kind of a work that UNESCO has been doing, and it's interesting to see it going through so many countries. He talks about the grant, the Research Youth Grant, that is on offer at the moment through that, and I think we've all made note of it. Moving on to Professor Munsifa, who talks about the intercultural dialogue and also the UNESCO chair. I think let me just say this, that the intercultural chairs, the UNESCO chairs have a great impact. And I think this one is, as she has explained it, doing various things, which is also on their website. And I think we can all refer to that. So that, I think, should sum it up from my side.
Okay.
I hope I haven't missed anything.
Yes, thank you very much, Sajida, for taking over this challenging work in summarizing such a rich debate. So we are really over time, so I'm suggesting that we move to the next sessions on the way forward with three key education experts from Korea, Thailand, and the Republic of Kyrgyzstan. So I would like first to invite Dr. Hugh Muk Lim. He's the director of UNESCO Asia Pacific Center of Education for International Understanding, which was created under the auspices of UNESCO, and Dr. Lim also served as Assistant Secretary General for Education at the Korean National Commission for UNESCO, and so he's going to share his view and perspective on how we can actually implement peace through education and through education policies and plan. Over to you, Dr. Lim.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ako. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be part of this webinar today. I thank the UNESCO Bangkok for this opportunity. Let me share my screen with you. Okay. The theme of this session, integrating MIL and intercultural dialogue into educational policy and plans, is a complicated issue. So we better start from one specific problem we all consider serious, that is hate speech on the internet and social media. So I have these 3 points. First, hate speech is a form of dehumanization of others. And secondly, critical thinking is fundamental to countering it. Thirdly, we need to start from literacy education. I was glad to hear that a couple of speakers at the previous session talked about literacy education. I will also focus on literacy education. Well, as we are witnessing during this pandemic, inequalities, discrimination, hate, and violence are increasing. These are all interlinked problems. But let us focus on hate speech for the moment. UN issued guidance note on COVID-19 related hate speech last year. In this guidance, hate speech is defined as a broad range of disparaging expressions against certain individuals and groups. And one of the recommendations to member states is that education should address COVID-19 related hate speech, disinformation, and misinformation by encouraging critical thinking, social and emotional skills, and responsible engagement through global citizenship education and human rights education. As you see, critical thinking is emphasized in education for countering hate speech, disinformation, and misinformation. Here again, we can see that UNESCO MIL curriculum for teachers also places strong emphasis on critical thinking. Critical thinking is considered one of the most important MI skills, and interestingly, the importance of MIL is highlighted for intercultural dialogue. Global citizenship education is another initiative of UNESCO that is highly relevant to the problem of hate speech. Although there is ongoing debate concerning the concept of global citizenship, we can say that basically GCED, Global Citizenship Education, aims to foster global citizenship understood as a sense of belonging to a common humanity. GCED aims to enable learners to become active and responsible citizens, both locally and globally, contributing to a more peaceful, just, inclusive, and sustainable world. GCED develops various capabilities necessary for us to live in this globalizing world as active and responsible citizens. But once again, we can see critical thinking and critical analysis of inequalities are important in GCED. Media literacy is also understood as underscored as part of civic literacy. So we find that both MIL and GCED emphasize critical thinking as the key to tackling hate speech, disinformation, and misinformation. Then the question is how critical thinking is developed. Before looking into critical thinking, let's think a little more about hate speech. What is the nature of hate speech? I think it is viewing others as less human or lacking humanity. It is seeing certain individuals and groups as inferior or dangerous. Case in point is calling certain Asian people a virus. This dehumanizing of others is based on emotions of fear and anger. But it's not a problem of some individuals. It cannot be reducible to individual psychological problems, but it has to be seen in the social context, such as inequalities, systemic discrimination, and more importantly, political leaders' intentional instigation. So in order to counter dehumanization of others, we need to question normalizations of dehumanizing others. We need to understand how dehumanization of others is justified and normalized in our society. Secondly, we need to make more efforts so that students, youth, and others can truly appreciate cultural diversity and understand others as different, not inferior or dangerous. In this effort, global citizenship can be a critical element. Thirdly, inequalities and discrimination should be tackled by the whole society. Obviously, these are not easy challenges, and education alone cannot solve this complicated problem. But it does have an important role to play. MIL education can develop the ability to critically evaluate the function of social media and its content. Global citizenship education enables learners of all age to critically analyze root causes of inequalities and discrimination and take collective action. Again, critical thinking is fundamental to our fight against hate speech, inequalities, and discrimination. Finally, regarding the question of how to develop critical thinking, I would like to suggest rethinking literacy education. Critical thinking starts from questioning the existing meaning, which is made possible through reading different kinds of texts and encountering different worlds of others. This is exactly what literacy is all about. Literacy is the ability to acquire, construct, and communicate meaning. Literacy is not merely about reading and writing. It is about understanding the world of others. If you want to communicate meaning with others, you have to understand the meaning constructed by others. The world of others may be unfamiliar or uncomfortable, but the purpose of literacy education is to enable us to experience this unfamiliar world of others. If literacy education is limited to experiencing the familiar world and to memorizing the fixed meaning, then our thinking will be confined to the narrow and superficial world of familiarity. This will lead to shallow and closed literacy, whereas efforts to understand the world of others will lead to more open and deeper literacy. But the current literacy education programs in many countries seem to be dominated by text. Text is dominated by text. If we want to develop critical thinking, we first need to depart from memorizing the fixed meaning of text and try to understand the world of others. So my point today is that good literacy education is good education for MIL and global citizenship. We need to recommit ourselves to literacy education, especially from the perspective of MIL and GCED. In conclusion, let me suggest some specific actions. First, we need to review the existing literacy education programs to find out to what extent they are helping learners understand the world of others. Secondly, UNESCO Bangkok could provide policy guides on the reform of literacy education in that direction. Thirdly, UNESCO Bangkok may also consider developing teaching materials and providing training workshops for literacy educators. Lastly, MIL teaching guide with topics and learning objectives will be very useful for literacy educators and policymakers. APCIU has done this for GCED with UNESCO, and building on this experience, we will collaborate with UNESCO again to develop MIL teaching guide. I hope these suggestions will be of interest to UNESCO Bangkok and to participants of this webinar. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lim, for your presentation and for, first of all, sharing all the UNESCO's resources on MIL and recalling them. And we are also in a process of updating the teacher training curriculum on media and information literacy. And it was very important that you recall the importance of critical thinking as part of media and information literacy and as part of global citizenship educations. And we are taking on board your 5 suggestions on the way forward in this area. Thank you very much. So now I would like to move to the next speaker, Ms. Duriya Amatavivat. Ms. Duriya, she's an expert of education, but also the former Deputy Permanent Secretary for Education and the former Secretary General of Thai National Commission for UNESCO. Welcome, Ms. Duriya. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Go. First, let me express my appreciation to UNESCO Bangkok and the government of Japan for organizing this webinar today. And the topic today is very relevant to the current situation, where diversity is one of the main concerns of how to live peacefully and happily in the society. And we believe that education is a key tool to provide positive values and social skills that will reinforce people of different cultures and backgrounds to understand and respect each other. Therefore, I would like to start my presentation by sharing with you on the national policy aiming to develop the country into a value-based economy or digital-based economy, also known as Thailand 4.0 policy. This economic model aims at achieving economic growth and sustainable development. The main element in the development of the Thailand 4.0 policy is the transformation of its citizens into more competent people. By reforming the education system as well as changing the curriculums and teaching methods, learners will be able to utilize the power of digital technologies. Digital technology has changed the way people communicate, collaborate, solve problems, make decisions, and consume information. Moreover, digital technology in media is a mechanism to support learners to experience a range of different cultures. As enormous digital content and resources are more easily accessed for learning, the adoption of digital literacy skills to improve the quality of learners is an important issue for the digital learning environment. And to align with this new learning environment, Thailand's national core curriculum was implemented for learners to cope with rapid economic and social changes, together with scientific and technological advancement. Learners should possess morality, ethics, desirable values, self-esteem, self-discipline, observance of one's faith, skills for communication, critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, technological know-how, and life skills. In addition, awareness of one's responsibilities and commitments as the citizens, and members of the world community, such as recognizing and adhering to a democratic way of life, awareness of the need to preserve all aspects of local cultures and wisdoms, the protection and conservation of the environment, and public awareness, with a strong dedication to public service for a peaceful and harmonious coexistence is very important. In the core curriculum, there is one subject that we call social studies, religions, and culture. And these subjects are mandatory subjects. And every learner will have to learn and understand cultural diversity and respect the differences of people, starting from the primary education level. These subject areas aim to provide learners with the knowledge and understanding of themselves and others, have tolerance, accept the differences of people, and learn to be good national and global citizens. Regarding occupation and technology subject, this is another subject. Learners will be educated on understanding technology and designing and creating objects through creative and technological process. Additionally, the concept of media literacy has been integrated into different subjects to ensure that learners will understand and apply their knowledge of digital technology and media to their daily lives, as well as integrate that knowledge into other subjects, such as science and mathematics, in order to solve problems efficiently. Other useful activities will be launched to help learners develop and create design works. They will also learn how to choose appropriate technology that will have less of an impact on other lives, societies, and environments, and learn how to build healthy relationships, live in harmony with others, and how to ethically use of this new technology. In addition to knowledge of technology, learners can also search information from reliable sources, use logical reasoning to solve problems, and use ICT and communication for their own benefits, while respecting the rights of other people. As technology changes our way of life and also lifestyle, future career prospects, and society and cultures, it is also important for learners to have the ability to analyze the media, realize the impacts of misinformation, fake news, and handle social interaction about this responsibility. We all realize that advanced technology has changed our way of life and we eagerly consume it rapidly. However, awareness of these advanced technologies and information consumption should be empowered to our people. Media also plays a vital role in transferring information to people as well as building up positive and negative perception to them. Learners need to be employed with the correct mindset, behaviors, and skills so they can take part in and understand the use of digital transformation technology and media. Along with Thailand 4.0 policy, the government underlines the importance of the disclosure of useful information for the general public, for transparency and anti-corruption. Today, Thailand's open government data under the name data.go.th has been developed to provide people with easy access to government data. However, the country is also aware of the misuse of personal information due to technological processes. In relation to this, 12 state laws have been amended and implemented, including the Personal Act of 2019, which was implemented to protect the privacy of personal information, while measures and regulations were also provided under international protocols. In closing, I would like to emphasize that Thailand is on the way to developing digital global citizens. Schools have been guided by the national core curriculum to promote the wellness of people in the digital world, in addition to digital literacy knowledge and digital citizenship. Moreover, mandatory subjects in combination to special activities can give a chance for learners to participate increasingly in saving the digital environments of the world, where digital technology encourages cultural interaction among people with different regional, political, and ethical differences. Currently, Thai learners will be employed with cognitive and social skills, values, and attitudes that are required for them to protect the country and the world, so that people can coexist in a more peaceful, tolerant, secure, and sustainable society. And the current 12th year National Education Plan, implemented dealing 2017 to 2036, is also highlighted media and information literacy and embedded in the core subjects with the hope that media could help building up and strengthening peace in the society so that we can live well with super diversity. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Duria, for sharing Thailand's policy for learners to become more comfortable in the 4.0 environment. I took some notes from your presentation that, you know, in addition to, from the previous presentation, to become critical thinkers, the learners need to use the power of digital technologies, and we also need to integrate MIL into different subject matters, including science and mathematics, to solve problems and learn how to live in harmony with others. Thank you for sharing those insights. So now I would like to move to the last speaker, Ms. Chinala Bosumbeva. She's the program specialist on communication and information from the National Commission of the Kyrgyz Republic of UNESCO, and she's going to speak on behalf of the Secretary General.
Thank you. Thank you for giving the floor. So the presentation so today's presentation is obviously about the perspectives for integrating media and information literacy and intercultural dialogue into educational policies and plans. And today's the case study is about the Kyrgyz Republic. So, well, actually, the presentation has two parts. The first part is about the policies and plans that are developed by the government of the Kyrgyz Republic to promote the media and information literacy and intercultural dialogue into the educational systems policies. And the second part is about the additional programs and project activities that are implemented on the territory of the Kyrgyz Republic on this topic. So to start with, the government of the Kyrgyz Republic has developed the state standard that are for all general educational institutions, and this standard has developed in line with the education for sustainable development goals. And this standard has four elements. Basically, this is to provide the physical, biological, psychological, and information security for the general education institutions. And today, on this presentation, I will concentrate on the information security, because taking account the nowadays pandemic, we also combating the disinformation and the fake news in the Kyrgyz Republic, as well as this information security is to educate students with how to critically come up with the media content and information overall. But this standard has developed so that the students can still enjoy the fundamental freedoms and the self-determination and development. And the state standard has the main value of this state standard is the awareness and acceptance of the values of cultural diversity as the basis for tolerance behavior in social, political, and cultural life, familiarization with the native language, culture, with the simultaneous development of cultural, spiritual of the peoples in their country and the world. So this is basically because on the territory of the Kyrgyz Republic there are more than 18 ethnic groups so that this can provide the multicultural environment to the general education institutions. So other than that, the Kyrgyz Republic has a national development strategy, and then this started on 2018, and it will be until 2040. So, and the development program of the Kyrgyz Republic for the period of the 2018-22, and it is called the Unity, Trust, and the Creation. So basically, these both development strategy and the development program aims to provide the quality education for all educational institutions on the territory of the Kyrgyz Republic, including the primary, secondary, and the higher educational institutions, as well as equipping the institutions with the modern materials, technical and methodological basis, as well as improving the qualification of teachers. So this national development strategy, as well as the program, both are also concentrated to promote the multicultural and multi-ethnic environment to the educational institutions, and it is called the Learning to Live Together, which is basically about the to provide an environment that has a multicultural content and that ensures comfortable learning in one educational organization for children of different ethnicity, implies that the organization of the multilingual education, the inclusion of multicultural competencies in the curriculum, and fostering the tolerance. So besides the national program strategy and the development program, the Kyrgyz Republic has implementing the national program for the digitalization of the educational institutions. I mean, taking into account the modern internet technologies and that are using in all aspects of our life. So under this national program, we have the two projects, which is called the Smart Schools and Interactive Schools. Both are dedicated to promote the ICT accessibility for all children and students in the educational institutions, as well as the usage of the digital technologies and materials for to study the school subjects. And these, well, actually, these national programs are dedicated to increase not only the usage of the ICT, but also the contributing to the improving the quality of education on the territory of the Kyrgyz Republic. So, in addition to the governmental policies and programs on the territory of the Kyrgyz Republic, there is a non-profit organization which is called Media Support Center. And this foundation is working for 18 years to promote the freedom of speech in Kyrgyzstan, as well as the development of the media information literacy in school systems of the Kyrgyz Republic. So the organization has implemented a number of projects, including the media literacy course, which is one of the projects of this organization for to promote the media literacy in the educational system of the Kyrgyz Republic. So the course has launched in 2012 and implemented together in partnership with the Ministry of Education and Science and Academy, National Kyrgyz Academy of Education, and this course is dedicated for the school students as well as the higher school students, and the course consists of both theoretical and practical activities. And the goal of the project, this course, is to raise awareness of the young people about the communications and media industry by introducing them in different types of media and advancing work skills, development of critical thinking by information perception and its processing, ability to analyze media content and to understand and to resist the manipulation in media. So under this project, the resource book of media information literacy was developed, and it was already published and distributed to all schools in the Kyrgyz Republic. And you can visit also the online platform. The link is here, and then it's provided in Russian, Tajik, and Kazakh languages. This is the information that consists with the video lessons and practical exercises, tests on meal, and the website is of course constantly updated. So in addition, as of now in Kyrgyzstan, the UNESCO Almaty Cluster Office, with the support of the Estonia, is implementing the project since 2019. It is called the Development Online Curriculum to Mainstream Cross-Cutting Competencies for Sustainable Development in Kyrgyzstan. The aim of this project is to develop the skills of media information literacy and intercultural tolerance. And the result, as of now, is the online lessons was developed in 15 pilot schools, and in addition, one of the main aspects of this project also to development of the ICT standards for the competence of teachers in the Kyrgyz Republic, which is basically about the introduction of the education for sustainable development on the teacher level training, and which has started to be developed. And then the National Commission of the Kyrgyz Republic for UNESCO is also working for the development and promoting the new and intercultural dialogue into the educational system. And we are working with the governmental institutions, UNESCO Almaty Cluster Office and UNESCO EFNET schools, as well as as of now, the National Commission is developing the ICH integration into the educational institutions, basically to raise the awareness of young people about the intercultural dialogue. And also the Kyrgyz Republic, together with the International Public Foundation, implemented a project, and then as a result the book was published, To Visit My Friends. This book is basically about the promoting the intercultural dialogue, and then this is the content of the book is about the visiting the diverse culture of ethnic groups in Kyrgyzstan. As a conclusion, I want to say that considering the all above mentioned aspects, and then taking into account the current pandemic situation, the Kyrgyz Republic is still implementing and updating and still developing the system of education in line with the modern requirements. I guess that's all. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions and inquiries, you are more than welcome. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Chinara, for sharing all the fantastic work that the Republic of Kyrgyzstan is implementing in the area of education. Just before closing, there was one question in the chat which remain unanswered, and I don't know if any of the panelists would like to take these questions. So the question is, what strategies can teachers employ to learn to live together during the pandemic? How do we cope with the concept of living together during the pandemic? Are there any panelists or speaker who wants to share their own experiences or not? Okay, so we can continue the discussions online. So now I would like for the closing remarks Thank you for staying with us for more than two long hours. I would like to give the floor to Ms. Krista Pikat, who is the director of UNESCO Almaty office and UNESCO representative to Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. Krista, the floor is yours.
They're partly able to brief these rich exchanges on the theme of living well with super diverse. During today's third webinar that leads, as was already to this regional dialogue on the role of education building a people will be March. Is more convinced than ever that education, intercultural dialogue, change
Krista, because the quality of sound is really bad, could you try to turn off the video? Because we miss the first sentences of your closing remarks.
So apologies, I think I was kicked out of the meeting, but now I hope you hear me.
Thank you, Krista, for joining. So yeah, again, because we had a technical problem, we couldn't hear you. So if you could, no, we couldn't hear your closing remark. It was all broken. So if you could start again, please.
So do you hear me now, Misako?
Yes, now it's okay. It's much better. Yeah.
I hope that this will stay that way. So I was simply expressing my thanks for this enormously rich debate that we had in the framework of this third webinar that leads up to the Together for Peace regional dialogue on the role of education in building a peaceful and sustainable future in Asia and the Pacific. That, as was said, will be held at the end of the month of March. I believe that we now are more convinced than ever that education for intercultural dialogue and exchange is an important prerequisite to build empathy and understanding across our diverse societies, but also of the importance of building media and information literacy and critically thinking skills among young people so that we can build and sustain positive peace. These exchanges today will feed into this regional dialogue, but they will also inform UNESCO's action in the region, in the region of Central Asia and Southern Caucasus, and I'm sure also in the wider region of Asia and the Pacific, and also in the specific context of COVID-19 pandemic and the related lockdowns. I would like to mention perhaps two initiatives that are related. We work on a UNESCO European Union partnership project in Afghanistan, Central Asia and Iran that actually looks at the common heritage along the Silk Roads. And this project allows us to build capacities in the use and management of cultural heritage, but also awareness among common heritage among the general public and the youth. And the second initiative that I wanted to mention, and this particularly relates to the COVID-related lockdowns, and it concerns the Central Asian Youth Space, or K-Space, that we developed. It's a regional online platform where we have gathered different educational resources, but also provide a space for young people to interact. Because our hope is that through these interactions, they learn more about each other in the region, but also that they acquire the necessary skills in cultural diversity, media and information literacy, climate change, that are related to sustainable development and to building peace, but also necessary for them to have as citizens of the 21st century. So once again, these exchanges that we had today will feed into our work, and I'm sure that we can pick up on many of these ideas put forward today to actually enrich and enlarge our interventions in these areas. I should, of course, on behalf of UNESCO, like to reiterate our thanks to the governments of Japan and Thailand for their partnership within this large regional project, but also to other partners and contributors to the webinar, the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, keynote speaker Laura Yerekesheva, all the inspirational panelists who provided great insights on this theme of diversity. I personally learned a lot, and also thanks for sharing these interesting experiences from parts of the world that I'm sure we will be able to replicate. I should also like to thank Sajida Haider Mandal, who very thoroughly and skillfully summarized the discussions on the was an easy task. And then I should also, of course, like to express my thanks to my dear colleague Shigeru Ayagi, the director of the UNESCO Bangkok office, as well as all the colleagues of the UNESCO Bangkok who contributed to the organization of the meeting, Sue and Misako, but also my own colleagues Sarina and Aigul, for contributing to that, and thanks for inviting the UNESCO Almaty office to help organize today's meeting, that actually also allowed us to bring a little bit of more participants from Central Asia and also share the good work that is done here, because we do not have Central Asian participants in our meetings very often. My last words of thanks go to all the participants who stayed with us for so long. Thanks for tuning in and for actually thinking along with us. Please do not forget that you also will have an opportunity between you switch off, that you will have an opportunity to watch again the UNESCO's Memory of the World Women in History exhibition short video that was launched on the occasion of the International Women's Day yesterday. So stay tuned for a couple of more minutes. Enjoy that. Thank you so much. Stay well and all the very best. Bye.
We were also very happy to hear so many great initiatives from Central Asia, and thank you for the collaboration of the Almaty office and of course your colleague Arina and Aigul. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining, and we will be sharing with you shortly the report of the webinar together with all the material that you asked for. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.